Anti-Trump. What does that actually mean? In this forthcoming book, Merchants of Truth, former New York Times executive editor Jill Abramson says her former paper, and the Washington Post too, have an anti-Trump bent. When Fox wrote about her comments a few days ago, she said she was taken out of context. But here's what she wrote in the book about the editor who replaced her, Dean Baquet. Quote, his news pages were unmistakably anti-Trump. Some headlines contained raw opinion, as did some of the stories that were labeled as news analysis. She also wrote in the book that the Times has a mostly liberal audience, so there was an implicit financial reward for the Times in running lots of Trump stories, almost all of them negative, in order to gain subscribers. Now, Trump is out there saying she's 100% correct. I've actually read the book, and I can tell you Abramson praises the Times at length. But let's dig into her anti-Trump claim. Frank Bruni, David Frum, Karen Finney are back with me. Frank, I used to work at the Times. You work there now. You used to be in the newsroom. Now you're on the opinion side. How did people react to Jill's comments in the book?
They were not as aghast as you might think. First of all, there's a lot of respect for Jill. Also, we accept criticism. I mean, we criticize ourselves every day. We try to take a tough look at ourselves. But also, I think most of us have seen more of the book or talked more to Jill about it. I interviewed her recently for a piece that'll come out in a few days. And this is a small part of what she said. If you look at what she says in full, it's respectful of the Times, on balance. She gives us a lot of compliments. And when she asks questions about coverage and coverage of 2016, she spends more time questioning the way we covered Hillary Clinton than she does the way we covered Donald Trump. So this one little strand, while it's not being reported inaccurately, has been blown out of proportion as her main point, and it is one of many, many points, all of which have some merit.
But this idea that news coverage of Trump is negative, is too negative, where does the truth lie there?
I disagree wholeheartedly with that. He's a singular president. He was a singular candidate. No one has lied like him. I mean, at that altitude. No one has had the sort of ethical problems that he does. No one has had the areas of ignorance. To call that out accurately is to end up with a body of coverage that is unusually negative, but it is absolutely appropriate to the man and the situation at hand.
So negative but accurate.
Yeah. Anti-Trump connotes driven by some sort of animus regardless of the facts. I don't think we've been anti-Trump. I think we have been negative, and I think that's the only honest way to cover this president.
What about tone, though? Do you think the tone is sometimes off?
Yes. I think the one way in which we leave ourselves vulnerable is our tone can become mocking and sneering, and I don't mean just on the opinion pages, where that's not so unusual, but sometimes in news coverage. When we do that, we hurt ourselves, because we give his supporters a way to say, look, they can't give him a fair shake because they feel so negatively toward him. So I think we do have to watch our tone. Yeah.
So, Karen, as a Democratic strategist, where do you come down on this anti-Trump conversation?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, I think I'll look forward to reading the book because certainly, having worked for Hillary Clinton, I did think that some of the way she was covered and some of the ways, frankly, in 2016 that Trump was covered may have meant that initially there was a little bit of an overcorrection in the way that Frank was discussing. But I think, again, this goes back to our nomenclature, right? And this is something as we go into 2020 and as we evaluate Donald Trump and sort of the way language and our use of language has really shifted. You know, it is not anti-Trump when you say that Robert Mueller is investigating him for potential collusion, or that, you know, that there is the evidence that there was, campaign finance violations. Those are not negative. That is not anti-Trump. Those are facts.
So you're saying anti-Trump versus pro-Trump is the wrong framing, the wrong axis?
I think that's absolutely the wrong axis. I think it has to be more about what is false and what is true, and then what is opinion. And yet, but what the thing that Trump does so well is, again, lumps it all together, and his people, and frankly, many Republicans in their defense of him, they say, oh, you're just attacking Trump, you're being anti-Trump, which makes it then harder to suss out what is fact versus fiction versus opinion.
Trump also has a booster network. He has booster outlets, cheerleaders that are unlike anything we've seen before in terms of the amount of coordination and collaboration that exists between the White House and these pro-Trump outlets. I mean, David Frum, is that the other part of this anti-Trump conversation we have to include?
No, I think the question is a false premise. Relative to the truth, the prestige press in this country has a pro-Trump bias. Relative to the truth, Trump gets easier coverage than he deserves. The surest way onto the op-ed page of a prestigious paper is to come up with some angle to explain why something the president has done is less crazy or dangerous than it seems. The networks like this one give a lot of airtime to people who normally would be working for the Home Shopping Network, who wouldn't be on at all if they weren't prepared to say absolutely.
You can be nicer than that. Hold on, you're saying that we are grading Trump on a curve, that the coverage is on a curve.
And that some of the things that you know to be true are so serious that indeed the press can't keep coming back to them. I mean, the fact that for example, the New York Times reported and used the word fraud, that the Trump family had been engaged in multi-generational tax fraud. The fact that, as the Times reported, the president falsified documents in order to evade the draft. I mean, the press can't it's just not possible to keep talking about all this all the time. And meanwhile, one of the patterns of the Trump years is that the controversies distract you from the scandals, because every day there's some new tweet that distracts you from the underlying truth of financial and national security scandal.
Frank, your reaction?
I want to say something about David's use of the word distraction, because I think it's so important. Yeah, which is, I think when we were talking about tone before, I think one of the problems is we cover so many of these tweets, so many of these tirades as theater, you know, and when we're talking about them on shows, when we're writing about them, you almost have a sense we've got a bucket of popcorn in our laps as we're gasping and chortling and whatever, as if it's National Lampoon's Washington government. No, it's our actual Washington government, and I think we do distract from the substance by covering too much of this as marvelous theater.
As marvelous theater. When in fact it's gravely serious.
When it's gravely serious, and we need to spend more time talking about the consequences and the context for these tirades and not the words themselves.
Karen, last word to you.
Well, I think the other thing that happens is, Trump is very effective at having conversations with the public on two levels, right? There is no unified message. He's continuously having one conversation via Twitter and his random statements, and then oftentimes we will see people in his administration say something wildly opposite or completely different. And so there's also not this but because it all gets framed as, any criticism or pointing that out gets framed as anti-Trump, again, I think it goes to what Frank just said, is the theater of it instead of the seriousness of having your national security advisor say something very different than what the president himself has said and what may in fact be good policy for the country.
Right, when the president contradicts himself every day and spews out nonsense and his words become worthless, and how to cover that continues to be a conundrum for the press. To our panel, thank you very much. Please come back soon. Coming up here, veteran military analyst William Arkin speaks on air for the first time since he announced he's leaving NBC. We'll talk about the shortcomings he sees in the military and in the media coverage right after this.